The small fleet of Vordax ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Their sleek purple-tinted vessels reflected the distant sunlight as they approached the third planet with methodical precision. On the command deck of the flagship, Commander Tarak studied the holographic display of Earth with yellow eyes narrowed in contempt. "So this is the homeworld of the creatures our scouts warned about," he said, running a clawed hand over his scaled chin. "They look primitive. Their settlements barely extend beyond their atmosphere." His second-in-command, Officer Ryu, shifted, uncomfortably. "The scout reports were quite specific, sir. They suggest these humans possess unusual qualities. Their adaptability and problem-solving abilities exceed—" "I've read the reports." Tarak cut him off sharply. "Exaggerations. Look, at their technology. They've barely established functional colonies on their neighboring planet. Their military capabilities are centuries behind ours." Ryu glanced at the data streams flowing through nearby terminals. "But sir, the behavioral analysis indicates—" "Enough!" Tarak slammed his fist on the control panel. "The Vordax Imperium has conquered species far more advanced than these humans. We need resources, and their Mars colonies have exactly what we require. Prepare the harvesting fleet." Across the system on the Red Planet, Dr. Su was the first to notice the strange readings on the monitoring equipment. The atmospheric scientist called her colleague over to the screen. "Do you see this?" she asked, pointing to the anomalous patterns. "Something large is entering our orbital space." Before her colleague could respond, alarms blared throughout the Olympus Mons research station. The facility shook violently as the first energy beams struck the protective shields. "They're targeting the terraforming equipment," shouted security, Chief June, as he burst into the control room. "Everyone to the emergency shelters now." But it was too late for many. The Vordax attack was swift and merciless. Their ships descended upon the Mars colonies like predatory birds, cutting through defensive systems with ease. They systematically destroyed the terraforming infrastructure and harvested the rare minerals and technology. Back on Earth, the Emergency Defense Council gathered in stunned silence as they watched the live feed from surviving cameras on Mars. President Gill stood rigid, hands gripping the edge of the table as reports of casualties streamed in. 3,000 confirmed dead, whispered Defense Secretary Park, her voice hollow. "Possibly thousands more. The colonies at Acidalia and Hellas Basin are completely gone." Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Force rose from his seat. His weathered face revealed no emotion, but his eyes burned with cold intensity. "We've been monitoring their communications," he said quietly. "They call themselves the Vordax. This appears to be nothing more than a resource raid to them. They don't consider us a threat." "Then they've made a fatal mistake," President Gill replied. "Admiral, you have full authorization. Show them exactly what humanity is capable of." As the Vordax fleet prepared to leave Mars orbit, their communications officer intercepted a transmission from Earth directed specifically at their flagship. "This is Admiral Park of Earth Defense. You have attacked without provocation and slaughtered our people. Make peace with whatever gods you worship. You have been warned." On the bridge of his ship, Commander Tarak played the message for his officers. After a moment of silence, laughter erupted among the Vordax command crew. "Did you hear that?" Tarak chuckled. "They're threatening us. With what? Their primitive rockets and pitiful weapons?" Officer Ryu didn't join in the laughter. "Sir, perhaps we should take precautions until we know more about their capabilities." "Nonsense," Tarak dismissed him with a wave. "By the time these humans develop technology to reach beyond their system, our grandchildren will be old. Set course for the Rigel outpost. We'll process what we've harvested and return for the rest later." As the Vordax ships accelerated away from Mars, they didn't detect the small, unmarked probe that detached from the remains of the Deimos station. The probe silently attached itself to the hull of the rear supply vessel. Back on Earth, in a classified facility deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Chief Engineer Jin watched as data began streaming in from the hidden probe. "We've got it," she said, nodding to the team of scientists and military personnel surrounding her. "Propulsion specs, weapons configurations, shield frequencies, everything." In the corner of the room, Admiral Park studied the real-time translation of the Vordax communication protocols. His expression remained unchanged as he activated his secure line to the President. "They think we're helpless," he reported. "They have no idea what's coming." In the weeks that followed, Earth changed. Nations set aside old rivalries as factories worldwide retooled for a single purpose. Universities redirected research toward military applications. The secret FTL Drive project, hidden from public knowledge for decades, suddenly received unlimited funding. And in orbit around Jupiter, the first ships of humanity's vengeance fleet began to take shape, built with one purpose: to hunt the Vordax across the stars. 6 months after the Mars attack, Captain Dury of the Vordax border outpost on Thalassa Prime couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sensation had grown stronger over the past week, like an invisible predator stalking through his territory. "Anything on the long-range scanners?" he asked his sensor officer. "Nothing, sir." "Wait." The officer leaned forward, adjusting controls. Frantically, "Contact unknown signature at bearing 735. Dury spun toward the viewscreen just as a sleek, dark vessel appeared at the edge of their sensor range. Unlike any ship he recognized, its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Identify yourself," Dury broadcast on all frequencies. 2. Mysterious ship remained silent for precisely 30 seconds before vanishing without engaging its engines. "Where did it go?" Dury demanded, his scaled fingers digging into the armrests of his command chair. "Unknown, sir. It's just gone." The sensor officer's voice trembled. No warp signature, no hyperspace window. It simply disappeared. Similar reports flooded in from across Vordax territory over the following days. Unidentified vessels appearing near outposts, observing silently, then vanishing without a trace. The Imperium Military Command initially dismissed these as sensor malfunctions until a supply ship captured crystal-clear images of one such vessel. In the Imperium's Central Command on Vordax Prime, Supreme Leader Korek studied the images with growing concern. "Impossible," he whispered, seeing the unmistakable human writing etched on the hull. How could they have developed interstellar capabilities so quickly? Lieutenant Kim sat motionless in the shadows of a crowded trading hub on Gantris Station, a neutral port frequented by dozens of species including the occasional Vordax merchant. Her dark eyes tracked the movements of a Vordax supply officer as he negotiated with local vendors. When the officer finally left, Kim followed at a safe distance, activating the subcutaneous translator beneath her skin. The microscopic device picked up the Vordax's communications, feeding real-time translations to her neural implant. "The Supreme Leader is demanding answers," the Vordax was saying to someone through his personal communicator. "These human ships shouldn't exist. Their planet showed no signs of FTL technology." Kim smiled slightly. Of course, Earth had shown no signs. The Deep Space FTL program had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for decades, hidden beneath the icy surface of Europa. Even most governments hadn't known about it until after the Mars attack. Back on Earth, the transformation was astonishing. Traditional enemies now worked side by side, united by grief and determination. The Global Defense Council had replaced squabbling national interests, and Director Song oversaw the most massive industrial mobilization in human history. In underground factories spanning every continent, workers assembled components for ships, designed with a single purpose. Above them in orbit, those components came together under the watchful eye of Space Commander Wu. "How long until the primary fleet is ready?" Director Song asked during their weekly briefing. Wu brought up a holographic display showing construction progress. "We've completed 27 interceptors and 3 capital ships. Another 15 vessels will be ready within 2 weeks. And the weapon systems? The captured Vordax technology has been educational," Wu replied with a thin smile. "Our engineers have not only replicated their energy weapons but improved them significantly. The power output is nearly double what their systems can achieve." Director Song nodded. "And our special projects?" "Project Phantom is fully operational. The quantum displacement drive works exactly as designed. Our ships can appear and disappear without traditional FTL signatures. In a classified briefing room beneath Geneva, Admiral Park addressed the assembled commanders of Earth's first combat-ready interstellar fleet. The Vordax are beginning to realize their mistake, he said, his voice steady and cold. But they don't yet understand the magnitude of their error. They see us as primitive because our technology wasn't as advanced as theirs. What they failed to consider was our history. He activated a display showing Earth's military conflicts through the centuries. Humanity has been fighting itself for millennia. We've mastered the art of war in ways the Vordax cannot comprehend. They've conquered through technological superiority alone. But he paused, looking at each commander in turn. We have survived and thrived through cunning, adaptation, and sheer determination. Lieutenant Jin raised her hand. Our intelligence teams have completed mapping 70% of Vordax territory. Their supply lines are extended and vulnerable. Their command structure is rigid and predictable. Perfect, Admiral Park said with a nod. Then we begin with Operation Shadow. Strike teams will target their supply chains, cripple their resource network, make them feel hunted. Across the room, Major Lee stood up. His specialty in historical, military tactics had proven invaluable in planning their strategy. The Vordax expect direct confrontation, he explained. Their entire military doctrine is built around overwhelming force meeting overwhelming force. They have no concept of asymmetric warfare, which is why they will fail, Admiral Park concluded. While they prepare for the fleet, they expect us to build will be striking from directions they never thought to guard against. On the edge of Vordax territory, a merchant vessel limped toward the nearest military outpost, its hull scorched and systems failing. Its captain, barely conscious, transmitted a final message before their life support failed. We were attacked. Dark ships appearing from nowhere. They knew exactly where to hit us. They knew our shield frequencies. The transmission cut off abruptly. When Vordax investigators finally reached the damaged vessel, they found something etched into the hull near the primary damage point. It wasn't written in Vordax language, but the translation was clear. You were warned. Deep in Vordax space, High Commander Terak received the reports with growing dread. The raid on the human colony that had seemed so inconsequential 6 months ago now appeared to have awakened something terrible, something that understood patience, strategy, and revenge in ways the Vordax had never needed to learn. The Vordax supply convoy moved cautiously through the Cygnus Passage, 14 heavily armed ships escorting precious fuel and materials to the military outpost on Thalaris. They traveled in tight formation, shields overlapping, weapons charged and ready. Any sign of the human vessels? Asked Fleet Commander Davox, his eyes never leaving the sensor displays. Nothing, Commander, replied his sensor officer. All sectors clear. Davox allowed himself a small breath of relief. Perhaps the increased security measures were working. Perhaps the humans had finally learned their limitations. 3 weeks had passed since the last attack. That's when the lights went out. Every ship in the convoy suddenly lost power. Emergency. Systems kicked in seconds later. But in those crucial moments of darkness, the damage was done. When the view screens came back online, 2 escort vessels were already drifting, their engines dead. A third exploded in a brilliant flash as something struck its reactor core. Where are they? Davox shouted, spinning in place. Find them. Sir, we're detecting no enemy ships, his officer stammered. The attacks are coming from nowhere, half a light year away aboard the Earth vessel Phantom. Admiral Park watched the operation unfold through the eyes of the automated strike drones. Each one, no larger than a human hand, carried a single EMP charge and precision explosives. Untraceable, and nearly invisible to Vordax sensors, they had attached to the convoy ships days earlier, waiting for the signal. Target the engines and weapon systems only, Park ordered. No unnecessary casualties. Major Lee stood at his side, studying the tactical display. The convoy is scattering just as predicted. Their formation discipline breaks under pressure. Their military doctrine never evolved beyond brute force, Park replied. They never needed the creativity that comes from fighting opponents of equal strength. When the attack was over, 11 of the 14 ships drifted powerless through space, their crews alive but stranded. Only 3 had managed to escape, limping back to the nearest Vordax base with tales that would spread fear throughout the Imperium. In her laboratory aboard the research vessel Horizon, Science Officer Han circled the captured Vordax weapons system, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she adjusted parameters. "Fascinating," she murmured to her team. "Their technology is impressive, but their approach is unimaginative. They've relied on the same basic principles for centuries." She pointed to the energy matrix at the core of the device. "See how they've configured the power distribution? It's efficient, yes, but they've never explored alternative geometries." Han's assistant looked up from his calculations. "The modifications are ready for testing, Doctor." She nodded, stepping behind the protective barrier as the team activated the modified Vordax cannon. The weapon hummed to life, its glow shifting from the typical Vordax purple to a deep blue as it charged. "Energy output at 185% of Vordax baseline," reported a technician. "Stability holding." Han allowed herself a small smile. Humanity's greatest strength has always been taking others' ideas and improving upon them. Across Vordax territory, confusion turned to panic as reports flooded in from every sector. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before counterattacks could be launched. Supply lines crumbled. Communication relays failed. Outposts went silent. In the Grand Hall of the Imperium Council on Vordax Prime, voices rose in anger and fear. "How are they doing this?" demanded Councillor Brax. "Our technology is superior in every way." Supreme Leader Korek raised his hand for silence. "We severely underestimated these humans. The raid on their colony was an error in judgment." "An error?" spat Military Commander Shorek. "It was your directive that authorized the raid. Now we face an enemy that strikes like ghosts and disappears into nothing." "Perhaps," suggested a quiet voice from the back of the hall, "it is time to consider diplomatic solutions." All eyes turned to Ambassador Norrell, known for his moderate views. "You suggest we negotiate with these primitives?" Shorek was incredulous. Norrell stepped forward. "They are clearly not primitive. Their attacks show remarkable restraint. They target our military capabilities while minimizing casualties. That suggests a specific goal rather than extermination." "The ambassador has a point," Korek admitted reluctantly. "Prepare a diplomatic vessel. We will send a message of..." The chamber. Doors burst open as a messenger rushed in, eyes wide with terror. "The humans," he gasped. "They've taken Outpost Draken. The entire defensive fleet gone." Silence fell over the council. Draken was no minor outpost. It was a fortress world, defended by the Imperium's finest ships and soldiers. Aboard the command carrier Retribution, Lieutenant Jin received the Vordax transmission with raised eyebrows. "They're requesting diplomatic talks," she informed Admiral Park. "They're offering reparations for Mars." Park's expression remained unchanged as he studied the star map showing Vordax territory, now riddled with dark zones indicating disrupted areas. "Relay this to Earth Command, but continue operations as planned," he said finally. "The Vordax only understand strength. Any negotiation must come from a position of absolute advantage." Major Lee nodded in agreement. "History teaches us that peace without victory is often temporary." Meanwhile, on the captured outpost of Dracon, human engineers worked quickly to understand and adapt the massive planetary defense systems. What the Vordax had built for protection would soon become a launching point for the next phase of humanity's campaign. Captain Yoon supervised as her team accessed the central computer core. "Look at this," called one of her specialists. "Their entire strategic database is stored here. Defense codes, fleet positions, everything." Yoon activated her secure channel to Fleet Command. "Sir, you're going to want to see this. We've just gained access to their complete military network." At that same moment, across Vordax space, military commanders stared in horror as their secure systems displayed the same message on every screen. "The hunt continues. You were warned." In his private chambers, Commander Terak, The officer who had led the fateful raid on Mars watched recorded footage of human attacks with growing dread. Their ships moved unlike anything he had ever seen, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with surgical precision. "What have I unleashed?" he whispered to the empty room. The answer came in the form of alarms blaring throughout his base. Human ships had arrived, and this time, they had come for him. The grand war chamber of the Vordax Imperium erupted in chaos. Officers shouted over one another as reports of new human attacks flooded in from across their territory. Holographic displays showed vast sections of their space now flashing red, compromised under attack or completely lost to human control. High Commander Shorek slammed his fist onto the central table. "Enough! We cannot continue like this. Our forces are scattered and demoralized." "Then we must consolidate," argued Fleet Admiral Zavos. "Pull back to our core systems and establish a defensive perimeter." "Retreat?" Shorek's voice dropped dangerously. "Lo, the Vordax do not retreat." "The Vordax have never faced an enemy like these humans," Zavos countered. "They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They avoid direct engagement. They strike where we're weak and vanish before we can respond." From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a different voice spoke. "Perhaps we should consider more extreme measures." All eyes turned to General Makari, commander of the Imperium's most elite fighting force. His reputation for brutality was well known even among the Vordax. "The humans care about their own kind," Makari continued. "We've intercepted enough of their communications to know this. If direct military victory eludes us, perhaps we should target their colonies, their civilian populations, force them to engage on our terms or watch their people suffer." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Some nodded in agreement, others looked uncertain. "And become the monsters they already believe us to be?" Ambassador Noral stepped forward. "This course would only confirm that their pursuit of us is justified." The debate might have continued, but at that moment, every screen in the chamber flickered. The Vordax security protocols fell one by one as an external signal overrode their systems. The face of a human appeared. Captain Choi of Earth Intelligence. "Greetings. Leaders of the Vordax Imperium," she said calmly. "I thought you might be interested to know that we are listening to your deliberations." Shorek's face contorted with rage. "How dare you breach our secure channels? This violation will—" "You speak of violations?" Choi's expression remained unchanged. Interesting choice of words from those who slaughtered thousands of unarmed colonists on Mars. "What do you want?" Zavos asked, pushing past Shorek. "We want you to understand your situation clearly," Choi replied. "General Makari's suggestion to target civilian populations has been noted and shared with all human military vessels. Any such action will be met with immediate and overwhelming response." With that final warning, the transmission cut off, leaving the Vordax leaders staring at one another in stunned silence. The revelation of human surveillance deepened the divisions within the Vordax military. Some officers, like Zavos, argued for immediate peace negotiations. Others, following Shorek and Makari, pushed for a final, desperate stand against the human threat. As the Imperium fractured from within, the humans prepared for what Admiral Park called the final phase. In orbit around Earth, the full might of humanity's fleet gathered. Ships of all sizes, from nimble fighters to massive carriers, formed a vast armada unlike anything Earth had ever produced. At its center floated the flagship Redemption, where Admiral Park addressed the combined fleet commanders. "For 6 months we have followed the strategy of our ancestors," he said, his voice carrying to every ship via the fleet-wide channel. "We studied the hit-and-run tactics of guerrilla fighters. Throughout Earth's history, we struck at supply lines like the privateers of old. We gathered intelligence and sowed confusion, like the resistance movements of past wars." On the tactical display behind him, the known Vordax territory appeared, with human-controlled areas highlighted. "But now," Park continued, "the time has come for direct action. Our intelligence confirms that the Vordax military has split into factions. They fight among themselves while we grow stronger, the location of their homeworld, Proxima, Vordaxia, is no longer a secret to us. A hush fell over the command deck as the star map zoomed in on a blue-green planet. "We will give them one final chance to surrender," Park said. "If they refuse, we will end this conflict decisively." The human fleet moved through space with precision and purpose, emerging from quantum displacement directly in the Vordaxian home system. The defenders reacted with predictable shock, scrambling to form a defensive line around their homeworld. Aboard the Redemption, Admiral Park watched calmly as the Vordax fleet assembled. Their ships were larger, more heavily armored, built for power and intimidation. The human vessels seemed almost fragile in comparison, but appearances were deceiving. "They formed a standard wall formation," observed Major Lee. "Exactly as their tactical manuals prescribe," Park nodded. "And exactly as we predicted. Begin Phase 1. The human fleet suddenly broke formation, splitting into dozens of smaller groups that accelerated in different directions. The Vordax commanders, trained to face enemies head-on, struggled to adapt to this unconventional approach. "They're trying to confuse us," barked Commander Tarek from the bridge of the Vordax flagship. "Maintain formation. Do not let them draw us out of position." But the human vessels continued their bewildering dance, some charging forward only to veer away at the last moment, others seeming to retreat before suddenly changing course. The Vordax formation began to waver as individual captains broke ranks to pursue what seemed like easy targets. "No!" Tarak shouted, watching his carefully arranged defense crumble. "Stay in formation!" Too late. The human ships suddenly converged from multiple vectors, targeting the gaps that had opened in the Vordax line. Smaller, more agile human vessels slipped between the massive Vordax warships, striking with weapons that somehow bypassed their shields. On the bridge of his interceptor, Flight Commander June led his squadron through the heart of the Vordax fleet. "Remember, your targets," he reminded his pilots. "Engines and weapons only. We're not here for revenge, we're here to end this." With surgical precision, the human forces disabled ship after ship, targeting propulsion systems and weapon arrays while avoiding life support and crew quarters whenever possible. The massive Vordax vessels, built for power rather than maneuverability, found themselves unable to bring their main weapons to bear on the nimble human attackers. As the battle raged, Admiral Park opened a channel to the Vordax homeworld. "This is Admiral Park of Earth Defense. Your military fleet has been neutralized. Your orbital defenses are next. We have no desire to harm your civilian population. Surrender now, and we will show the mercy that you denied to our people on Mars." The response came not from the military command but from the Vordax ruling council itself. Supreme Leader Korek appeared on screen, his usual arrogance replaced by grim resignation. "The Vordax Imperium requests terms." As the last Vordax warships powered down their weapons, a strange quiet settled over the battlefield. Disabled vessels drifted silently, their crews watching in disbelief as human ships established orbit around their homeworld. Among the Vordax, Commander Tarak, the officer whose decision had started this conflict, stood on his ruined bridge, staring out at the stars. He had survived to witness the unthinkable, the defeat of the mighty Vordax Imperium by a species they had dismissed as primitive only months before. "How?" he whispered to himself. "How did they advance so quickly?" The answer came from an unexpected source, a human officer who had boarded to accept the formal surrender of Tarek's vessel. "We didn't," said the human quietly. "We already had the technology, we just never had a reason to use it this way before. You gave us that reason." Morning light spilled across the grand plaza of Vordax Prime as humans and Vordax gathered for the formal signing of the peace accord. The massive stone amphitheater, once reserved for imperial proclamations, now served as the stage for a new chapter in galactic history. President Gill of Earth stood tall despite her small stature compared to the towering Vordax officials. She wore a simple white uniform adorned only with the blue-green emblem of unified Earth. Beside her, Admiral Park maintained his stoic expression, though those who knew him well could see the subtle signs of exhaustion after months of relentless campaigning. Across the table sat Supreme Leader Korek and what remained of the Vordax Leadership Council. Gone were the elaborate military decorations and symbols of conquest that had once covered their ceremonial attire. Today, they dressed plainly, humbled by defeat. "The terms are fair," President Gill said, her voice carrying across the silent plaza. "Reparations for Mars, technology exchange, mutual defense agreements, and most importantly, recognition of humanity as equals in the galactic community." Korek's yellow eyes studied the human leader carefully. "You could have demanded, 'Much more, your forces control our defense systems, our military is in ruins.'" "Destruction was never our goal," Gill replied simply. "Only justice and security for our people." As the leaders signed the document, crowds of Vordax citizens watched from beyond the plaza barriers. Many had expected the humans to be monstrous, conquerors destroying their cities and enslaving their people as the Imperium had done to others. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented, victors who seemed more interested in building bridges than burning them. In the weeks that followed, the transformation began. Human engineers worked alongside Vordax technicians to repair damaged infrastructure. Medical teams shared treatments for injuries sustained during the conflict. Cultural exchanges flourished as both species cautiously began to learn about one another. At a military tribunal in the former Imperial Palace, Commander Tarek stood before a mixed council of human and Vordax judges. His scaled shoulders slumped as the charges were read. Unauthorized military action, war crimes against civilian populations, violation of established contact protocols. "Do you understand these charges?" asked the lead judge, a stern Vordax elder. Tarak raised his eyes. "I do. And how do you plead?" "Guilty," Tarak said, his voice barely audible. "I misunderstood. I believed technological superiority was the only measure of advancement. I was wrong." From the gallery, Admiral Park watched silently. He had insisted on attending this particular trial, facing the commander whose actions had cost thousands of human lives. Yet as he studied Tarak's defeated posture, Park felt no satisfaction, only a weary acceptance that justice was being served. Later, walking through the gleaming corridors of the human embassy, Park encountered Science Officer Han deep in conversation with a group of Vordax researchers. "Admiral," Han called out, excitement in her voice. "You need to see what we've discovered. The Vordax quantum communication technology combined with our displacement drive. It changes everything." Park allowed himself a small smile as he joined the animated discussion. This was what humanity had always done best: learn, adapt, improve, even from enemies. 6 months after the peace accord, the first joint human Vordax research vessel launched from the orbital shipyards above Vordax Prime. Named Concordia, the ship represented the best technologies from both civilizations, crewed by scientists and explorers from Earth and the former Imperium. Captain Yoon stood on the bridge, surveying her mixed crew with quiet pride. "Course laid in, Captain," reported her Vordax navigator. "The anomaly at the edge of the Sagittarius arm awaits." Yoon nodded. "Take us out, Lieutenant. Standard displacement drive." As the Concordia vanished into the quantum field, observers from a dozen alien civilizations took careful note. Throughout the galaxy, reports circulated about the strange alliance between humans and Vordax, former enemies now united in exploration. Many questioned how such a partnership could form so quickly after bitter conflict. In the Grand Archives of Vordax Prime, historian Minseo carefully recorded the events of what was already being called the Pursuit War. As one of the few Vordax scholars who had studied human history before first contact, she had the unique perspective needed to explain what had happened. Her stylus moved steadily across the page as she wrote, "The greatest mistake in Vordax history was not attacking the humans. Our species had conquered many worlds before, often with similar methods. No, our true error was failing to understand humanity itself. We measured advancement solely through technology, ignoring the fierce adaptability that humans had forged through millennia of struggle against themselves and their harsh world. When Commander Tarek dismissed the warnings about human tenacity, He overlooked the most dangerous quality of these strange bipeds, their ability to transform themselves in response to threats. A species that had fought itself in countless wars had learned lessons our unified Imperium never needed to learn. They understood patience, they understood sacrifice, and most dangerously, they understood how to fight enemies stronger than themselves. Perhaps most surprising was what happened after their victory. The humans didn't want our extinction. They wanted respect. And now, the galaxy has learned what humans have always known. Warnings exist for a reason. As Minseo completed her account, news arrived that shook the fragile peace. Long-range scouts reported movement at the edge of known space, a vast armada of unknown vessels approaching from the galactic rim. Early data suggested a hive-mind species, consuming all resources in their path, destroying any civilization they encountered. In emergency chambers on both Earth and Vordax Prime, leaders gathered to assess the threat. "They'll reach our outer colonies within 6 months," reported Defense Minister Quan. "Based on their trajectory and speed, they've already destroyed at least 3 civilizations along their path." Supreme Leader Kyorek, looking older than he had a year ago, turned to Admiral Park. "Your assessment?" Park studied the tactical projections with a grim expression. "Neither of us could stand against this alone. Together, we have a chance." Across the table, Commander Zhen, who had fought brilliantly during the human campaign against the Vordax, now stood shoulder to shoulder with former enemies. "The Vordax understand direct force and overwhelming power," she said. "Humans understand adaptation and unconventional tactics. Combined, we become something new," finished Korek, "something neither of us could be alone." As the meeting concluded, Admiral Park found himself walking alongside Minseo in the corridor outside. "I read your historical account," he said quietly. "Very insightful," the Vordax historian inclined her head. "I merely recorded what happened, though I admit I never expected to see our peoples united so soon." Park gazed out a viewport at the stars. "Nothing unites former enemies like a common threat." "Perhaps," Minseo replied. "Or perhaps this is simply the natural order of things. Those who survive conflict must eventually find peace or be consumed by endless war." In shipyards throughout human and Vordax space, a new fleet took shape, vessels combining the best of both worlds. And in training grounds across 2 civilizations, soldiers who had once fought each other now learned to fight together. The galaxy would soon learn another truth about humans. They could transform enemies into allies just as quickly as they could transform themselves into warriors. The warning that the Vordax had ignored would soon serve as a shield for both species against the darkness approaching from beyond.